Hello everyone, my name is Aldrich and I am a California Notary Public loan signing agent. In this video, I will show you common examples of preliminary change of ownership report, that is also known as PCOR, and the documentary transfer tax affidavit that goes with it. This video has chapters, so you can skip directly to the section that interests you. I know that a lot of notary signing agents can be confused with these documents, especially when they start their journey as a notary loan signing agent. I hope it will help you guide you signers through it. But ultimately, I am not an attorney, and if you signers need an answer and if you have questions, only an attorney can let them know what they should answer. This being said, let's jump right into it. Let's start with the most common preliminary change of ownership report situations that you will encounter. It's for a sale. So in this case, I'm going to talk about a resale property and also a new home property. Alright, so if you look at the document, usually it's pre-filled by the escrow company. So here on top you can see the name of the person, in this case would be the buyer to the property. So I put John Doe here. Most of the time, this section is filled up as well, meaning on top is the APN number, assessor's parcel number. If there is nothing filled up here, you can find the information either in the grant deed, it shows APN. Here's an example, so this is a grant deed. And here on top, you see APN and the number that you're looking for. So again, assessor parcel number. If you don't have a grant deed, or if you don't see it on the grant deed, you can also look at the deed of trust. For the deed of trust, it will show under PIN. So this is an example here of a deed of trust, and you see to the right here it shows PIN and the number that you need for your preliminary change of ownership report. Alright, then in this case here you see that the seller, that is also the transferor, is Richmond American Home, so it was for a new build. This number here is for the buyer, in this case John Doe. Most of the time this is never filled up, so usually I ask my signer to print their phone number just here and underneath the buyer's email address. Again, this info is usually filled up already. Here, it's the address of the property being purchased. So I put like some kind of address here. It's another information that is already pre-filled. Alright, so here we have two questions. This property is intended as my principal residence. If yes, please indicate the date of occupancy or intended occupancy. So most of the time it will be for the main residence of the buyer. So if it's the case, it would be yes. And then when are they supposed to move to the new property, or at least when do they plan to occupy it? So usually it's within a few days after they close on the transaction. But it can also be a second residence or an investment residence. So in this case, instead of being yes, the signer would have to pick no. Underneath, are you a disabled veteran or an unmarried surviving spouse of a disabled veteran who was compensated at 100% by the Department of Veteran Affairs, VA. So here you have to make sure that the disabled veteran is 100%. Some people are disabled veteran, but to another percentage. So most of the time it's gonna be no, unless, as I said, that someone is 100% disabled. So this has to be filled up all the time. Underneath, same thing, mail property tax information to which name? Most of the time, the buyer that you can see here is the one who will want to receive the property tax information, and they will just copy their name here. If it's a married couple, you can write both names or one is enough. In other situations, it can be someone else that wants to receive the tax information. I don't know if it can be a CPA, someone taking care of your business. I don't know, but if it's the case, it has to be filled up here. The address, you can see here it's the address of the property being purchased. Most of the time, especially when it's for your principal residence, it will be the same address here. But if it's someone who prefers to receive all his mail at a PO box, it can be a PO box here. Or if it's a second property or an investment property, usually they want to receive the mail at the residence they live all the time. Alright, so now we have the part 1, transfer information. In the case of a sale, usually here everything is no, most of the time. Except here you see the recorded document creates, terminates, or reconveys a lender's interest in the property. This is when there is a loan on the property. So when there is a mortgage, a note is created and there is a recorded document that is created. This recorded document is also called the security instrument, is the deed of trust that will be recorded at the county. And you see, this is a security instrument. And it gives info regarding the borrower, the lender, and the note. So usually I have the signer sign the deed of trust first, and right after I have them fill the preliminary change of ownership report, the PCOR. Why? Because it's easier for them to understand this here. So as we could see, the recorded document is the deed of trust, creates a lender's interest in the property. Yes, it creates a lender's interest in the property through this security instrument. The lender is of course interested in your property because they gave you a loan. So this lien is actually what is created. So in this case, it will be yes. If it's a cash purchase, obviously this would be no. But you cannot tell the signer what to do. You can just help them to understand what this means. So you see recorded document, I put deed of trust, creates a lender's interest in the property, new loan. I just wanted to point out that for this line, either I or H, depending on the PCOR form you are using, people may have different ideas of what could be the answer, from yes to no. But if we look again at the document, what it says, the recorded document creates a lender's interest in the property. If I look at the instructions, it's page 3 of the PCOR. Check yes if the change involves a lender who holds title for security purposes on a loan and who has no other beneficial interest in the property. So yes, it involves a lender. So then you can wonder, who holds title? You may think like the lender does not hold title. I hold title if you're the buyer. But look at what is underneath. During a real estate transaction, the seller actually transfers the property to the lender. The lender holds the actual legal title on the property, while the borrower will hold equitable title. The lender holds title to the property in the name of the borrower through a document called a deed of trust. So basically, the lender in a way holds the title until you have paid off your mortgage. So if you look at this explanation that you can just Google to make sure it's correct, check yes if a change involves a lender who holds title. That's actually the case. In my understanding, again, I'm not a lawyer. I cannot tell the signer to pick either yes or no, but I'm just taking the time to have them read correctly the transfer information question, IOH, and then to look at the instruction. And they can also Google what I've just done to have the definition underneath, so they can fill it up correctly. So that's the only thing to fill up when it's for a resale property with a loan. However, if it's for a new build, in this case you see for a builder, a brand new home, you can see here P, this transfer is to the first purchaser of a new building. Yes, it's a brand new home, it's the first time it's being purchased. And then new homes have to come with an active solar energy system, at least in California, where I live. So there's also another question that appears here on the new PCOR. It's, in this case, it adds a new building containing either a leased or an owned active solar energy system. So for this, you will have to ask the signer if they purchased the solar system, and it might be in their lease, or I don't know, or if they decided to lease it, and obviously they have a lease agreement somewhere else. So in this case, they will have to fill first yes if they are the first buyer to the property, and either if it's leased or owned. And that's it for the first page. On the second page, we can see on top here, date of transfer if other than recording date. I would say 99% of the time you leave it blank because it will be the same date. But if it's different, obviously you can have the date being filled. Type of transfer. We talk about purchase for resale or new home. So it's going to be a purchase. Then we have this question. Only a partial interest in the property was transferred. Most of the time it's going to be no, meaning that the buyer will have 100% of the property in their name, so 100% interest for them in this property. But in some situations, let's say someone buy a properties for, let's say they're gonna be 60% the owner, and another party buying the property with you will be 40% for 40% the owner of his property. So in this case, you would say only a partial interest is transferred, yes, and if yes, indicate the percentage transferred, so 40, 60%, whatever. But this is extremely rare, I would say. Underneath, for the purchase price and terms of sales, most of the time here on top, the sales price is filled up. If it is not filled up, you can look at the closing disclosure or the closing statement or the settlement to see what was the sales price on top here. Cash down payment or value of trade or exchange excluding closing cost. So basically the cash down, how much money they put down. So this amount can be found on the closing disclosure on the third page. On the top you will see what's the amount of down payment, and you have the signer put this amount here. Next, what is the first deed of trust? So basically this is the interest rate. Again, you will find this information on the first page of the closing disclosure and also on the note. First deed of trust for how many years? Most of the time it's 30 years, and this duration is on the note and closing disclosure. Monthly payment. This monthly payment, once again, you can find it on the note, it's a principal and interest, or on the closing disclosure. And then to the right, amount here, it's the loan amount. So this loan amount on the note and closing disclosure. For this interest rate that we found here, it is asked if it's a fixed rate or a variable rate. It's usually a fixed rate, but when interest rates are high, it can be more frequent to see some variable rates, or in some situation when it's for investment properties. But I would say for let's say 70% or more, or even more, it's going to be a fixed rate. All right, then, is it an FHA loan? So for a first home buyer. So if it's the case, in your packet, in your buyer's packet, you will see some document showing that it's an FHA loan. So if it's the case, it has to be checked, and if there's any discount point, it can be filled up here. Discount points can be found on the closing statement, the settlement, under the lenders section. And there's also usually a specific page to mention the discount point you have, if any. Car vets or for veteran, VA. So this is for the military personnel, and same thing, just like an FHA. So you would find if there's a discount point in the closing statement or settlement, and you will also have some VA docs who could show it. So we'll write here, but it's not always the case to have a discount point. Bank, saving, loan, credit union, loan carried by seller, balloon payment. Sometimes you have this balloon payment and you will see this info in the note. So it will tell you what's the balloon payment, what's the amount, and the due date. This will be in the note. This is not very frequent. It can happen mostly, usually for investment properties. Second deed of trust, sometimes you can have two loans on a property. If it's the case, you fill it up just the same as here. Not common either. Was an improvement bond or other public financing assumed by the buyer? I personally never seen anyone answering yes, and most of the time people don't even know what it is. If they don't know what it is, 99.99% chance that it's gonna be no. But you can always double check with them for sure. Alright, here, amount, if any, of real estate commissions fees paid by the buyer which are not included in the purchase price. Well, it's self-explanatory. It's absolutely not common to see that. G. The property was purchased through a real estate broker. So did you use like a realtor to purchase the property? If yes, you can check it and then enter the broker's name and phone number. When you purchase a brand new home through a builder, most of the time you don't have a realtor and you don't really need one. And it could be direct from seller. So direct from seller can be the new home builder. But it can also be that if you just found a property you like and you didn't use any realtor and you purchase it directly from the seller for resale home or resale property. See, there's some other option from a family member relationship, not very common, and if there's any other situation you can explain what it is. Same thing, absolutely not common. Property information. So here you can fill if it's a single family residence, so basically a house, typical house. Multiple family residence, so it can be like a 2, 3, 4 units a residence, for example. You see number of units. So if it's the case, you just fill it up here in addition, over. This is not common. Co-op or new home. Co-op or new own, same thing, not very common. Condominium, this is pretty typical if you buy a condo. And a timeshare. I think people don't like to buy timeshare too much lately, but it used to be more common. Alright, then here, this is mainly for resale homes. Personal, business, property or incentive provided by seller to buy are included in the purchase price. Let's give you an example for a resale home. The seller is leaving their home and they leave a lot of things behind. I don't know, they can leave, for example, a lawnmower or some materials that they don't need anymore and they're just gonna leave at the property. So if it's the case, you can just check yes, and if yes, enter the value of this property that is left. So, it's, I guess, to give you an idea of how much the property that is left behind, how much it could be worth. So it's up to you to enter what it should be worth here. Most of the time it's gonna be no. People take all their things when they move out, and if you buy a brand new home, obviously there's nothing in it. Underneath here, a manufactured home is included in the purchase price. So this will be mainly for a sale that is for a manufactured home. So if it's a typical single family residence or condo, it's gonna be no. However, in some situation, you buy a single family residence and on the lot there's also a manufactured home. It's not common, but you never know, it could be possible. Then the manufactured home is subject to local property tax. So this is only if you answered yes to this previous question. And so obviously you would say yes or no, and if no, enter decal number from this manufactured home. The decal number is just like a serial number, just like on a car, you have one on a manufactured home. And sometimes if the manufactured home is so old and there's not even a decal on it anymore, you would just put NA here, because you cannot see, you don't know. This is more for a resale home. The property produces rental or other income. So it's mainly if you purchase an investment property. Purchase, let's say, a condo that has already someone in it renting it. So basically you buy the property and you may just keep and have the previous or the current tenant in it. And then if yes, the income is from, and you just fill it up. And it's not very common either, but it can happen from time to time. Finally, the condition of the property at the time of sale was good, average, fair, poor. Self-explanatory. When you buy a brand new home, the little joke I have is like, hopefully it's at least in good condition if it's brand new. And that's it for the info to fill up here. At the end, you always have the buyer signing here, and underneath print the name. The right, the date, the telephone number, email address. Title here, when it's the buyer filling up this document, I just tell them that they can put buyer. And that ends up the PCOR for a purchase. This form, the Documentary Transfer Tax Affidavit, goes together with the PCOR, Preliminary Change of Ownership Report, that we just saw before. You see a fixed PCOR label here. So when it's for a purchase, most of the time there is a fee. So you see here $815.65, and then nothing has to be filled up here because there is something to pay. Most of the time, nothing is written here. If nothing is written, you just take your closing statement or your settlement, and you will see in the section Government Recording and Transfer Charges, County Documentary Transfer Tax to County Recorder. You see the amount is here, and you can just have this amount put here. And then the rest, the same person who filled the PCOR just date the document, sign. This is the city where this specific document is being signed. Printing name, address, phone number. So pretty typical. Here is another situation when you will have the signer fill a preliminary change of ownership report. It's in the case of a transfer between spouses, and more specifically when you have an Interspousal Transfer Grant Deed. So when you have such document, it basically means that the property of the transaction will be in one name and not in both names. So you see you have a document like this, for example. In this case, you will see that here Jane Doe is granting John Doe the following described property, and as is sole and separate property, meaning for a married couple the property will be only in one name. But in this case, when you have a purchase, at closing they need to fill this document here to technically remove one spouse, and it comes with a preliminary change of ownership report. So the info here, it's kind of the same as what we saw before. So again, here we have the name to the person who will have the property, and you see the seller transferor is, in this situation, it was his wife. So Jane is giving away actually her rights to own the property in a way. So then you fill up the same information here. So when it's for a purchase, it doesn't change much, so yes. When the people plan to occupy the property, same thing for the name, address, like we saw before. And in this one, this time, it's for the first question A, this transfer is solely between spouses, addition or removal of a spouse, in this case. So this is when something is purchased. However, it works also when you just want to remove one person. So same thing, it will only be different here, like meaning since when you've been occupying the property. That's why here in this example I put 2005, for example. Alright, then on the second page there is not much to fill up. So usually I just do that straight through, and the bottom needs to be filled up. You see in this situation I put for title transferee. Some people don't write anything, and that's okay as well, but it still needs to be signed, printed, date, and telephone, email, and title. I mean, if you can fill it up, great. If not, I guess that's okay as well. The PCOR that we saw before always goes together with the documentary transfer tax affidavit. When it's a transfer between spouses, just like we saw, usually there is nothing to pay, so it's always zero. And then you have to say why it's zero. So here it was filled up already, but usually it's not. So usually you check here over, and you see this conveyance establishes sole and separate property of a spouse. So that's good to keep this in mind, so you know what the signer should fill up here. And then at the bottom it's pretty self-explanatory, the date, the city where this document was filled up. This document also works when there's a divorce. So during a divorce, obviously assets are separated. So when it's the case, it's just to remove the person that will not own this property anymore. So for example, in this case, if it was a divorce, Jen would be the person who would not own the property anymore. It would be John's property only. Here is my last example. It's a little bit similar to the previous one when it was a removal of a spouse, but in this situation it's when one of the spouse is deceased and it's to remove the deceased spouse. So for instance, let's say you have a property that someone wants to sell, but the seller technically on the paperwork shows, let's say, John Doe and Jane Doe, who purchased maybe this property like 20 years ago. In the meantime, one of the spouse died, so you want to remove this spouse. So in this situation, it would be, for example, Jen, because you see here it's John who is the surviving spouse that is named here. So like before, usually most of it is filled up except the phone number that you may have to ask the signer to fill. Then here, this property is intended as my principal residence. It can be yes. If it was just to remove this the spouse who passed, and since when they occupy the property. So here you see it's all 2005. And the same thing for taxes, the name of John Doe, his address. And then here it's like the previous document. On A we check yes, this transfer is solely between spouses, and in this case it's death of a spouse. And what is good to do as well, it's at the bottom when it shows over, you can have it checked as well, and you can add this. So this transfer is to remove the deceased spouse. And usually this document can go with a certificate of death that could be signed. In the previous section, it was an Interspousal transfer, in this case a certificate of death, for example. Not always, but it can happen. On the page 2, so you can either just cross everything and be done. I've seen a few times some escrow who would do this in part 2. They would check over here and they would add exactly the same thing as in page 1, transfer to remove the deceased spouse. Doesn't have to be done, but because it's kind of redundant, it already shows in page 1. But as I'm saying, I saw at least one escrow company doing that. And same escrow company, you see they were filling up again the information of the property, what it was, single family, no. But this again, it doesn't have to be filled up. It could just be crossed like that if you don't want to have anything filled up. And at the bottom again, so the affiant is signing, printing name, the date, telephone, email address, and title. And this, if you don't have it, that's okay, but it's always better to fill as much as possible. For the documentary transfer tax affidavit, it's just like when you remove a spouse in the interspousal, like we've seen before. Usually there's absolutely no fee, 0, and here you check over just before, but this time the reason is transfer to remove a deceased spouse, and same thing to fill up here.